Well, it's here again. October, the month of Halloween, and you all know what that means, don't you? That's right, it's time to take a look at some horror-related films and video games, and we are going to start with a relatively special case. Some of you may know it, but most of you probably don't. Either way, I give you Creepshow. From legendary director George A. Romero and hit-and-miss writer Stephen King comes this now cult classic. Inspired by various DC and EC horror comic books like Tales from the Crypt and House of Mystery, this so-called anthology film is a loving homage to those same comics. Instead of featuring just one overarching storyline, this film contains 5 separate short stories presented in the style of, you guessed it, a comic book. This means that you get a lot more variety than most other films, but is that variety for the better? Are these stories any good, or should they have stuck to just one of them, if any at all? Well, that's what we're here to find out, isn't it? So let's not delay this any further. Let's just take a look at Creepshow. So the film starts off with a father yelling at his son. Isn't that nice?
I never saw such rotten crap in my life. Where do you get this shit?
I mean, Spider-Man making a deal with the fucking devil? What the hell is that? Actually, it turns out that the boy was reading a horror comic book, which his father apparently doesn't like all that much. They have a fairly heated argument for a while, with the father even going so far as to hit the son. After telling his son to go to bed, the father throws away the comic book, and we see the son stewing in his room. Okay, what little boy is this? I don't care how mad he was with his dad. Any kid his age seeing a fucking skeleton suddenly appearing outside his window would probably react more like this. I hate my dad. He's an ass. I wish he was dead. I wish he would rot and... Oh, hey, look, it's... Ah! 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 Daddy! Daddy! Help me! Help me! I don't want to die! In any case, the skeleton then transforms into an opening credit sequence that leads us into the first story, simply titled Father's Day. A group of people are sitting in a fancy living room in some mansion, talking about an Aunt Bedelia who they're apparently waiting for.
Isn't she the one that was supposed to have... well...
Supposed to have murdered her father, yes.
Yeah, apparently this Bedelia woman killed her own father after he had her lover murdered. Ever since then, Bedelia has visited her father's grave at 6 o'clock on every Father's Day, as that's when she took his life and feels the most guilty about it. After learning this, we see Bedelia approaching her father's grave as she has a flashback to the day he was killed.
It's Father's Day! Where's my cake? You promised me my cake!
Oh, come on, guy! Everyone knows that the cake is a lie! Anyway, having had her flashback, Bedelia sits down in front of her father's grave with a bottle of whiskey and spouts off some drunken ramblings about how he got what he deserved, when suddenly... Boy, you really have a sweet tooth, don't you? I mean, I like cakes as much as the next guy, but coming back from the grave just to get your hands on one seems a bit extreme. Seriously, you should probably talk to someone about that. So, with Bedelia killed, we cut back to the mansion where... Oh, fuck no.
Down and turn it down right now.
White people, we really can't dance. After that piece of awkwardness, we see Hank, this guy played by Ed Harris, go outside to look for Bedelia. He doesn't find her, but he does come across her whiskey bottle. Unfortunately, when he tries to take a swig from it, he trips and falls into an open grave.
Jesus.
Oh shit, that didn't look good. I guess he better get out of the way as fast as possible, huh? Hello? Why the fuck aren't you moving? Yeah, okay, so you found a dead body, but if you don't start moving, you're going to be one too, you fucking moron! Move your stupid ass! for fuck's sake! I know there's a scary zombie corpse in front of you, but that's no excuse not to get the fuck away from that fucking headstone before it falls and crushes your fucking retard brain! Move!
You get out of that hole!
You see? Now you're dead. You could have just spent a few seconds to get out of the way, but nope, this idea was much better. And by the way, why did Bedelia's father want Hank dead anyway? I mean, we are supposed to believe that he was the one who made that headstone fall, right? Well, what did he have against Hank? The others I kinda get, as they do mention that Bedelia wasn't the only one who benefited from her father's death.
It was good riddance to some extremely bad rubbish. And my lovely niece and my handsome nephew have very good reasons for being pleased at old Nathan's death. There was no trouble about the will. Share and share alike.
Hank, on the other hand, has seemingly just recently become a part of this family. From what I can tell, this is the first time he's taken part in this Father's Day dinner, so why would Bedelia's father want him dead? I guess you could argue that technically Hank now benefits from his death as well, but he didn't even know about his murder until today, at least not in detail. Come to think of it, why the hell didn't Bedelia's father come back to life before? I mean, it's not like this is the first Father's Day after his death or anything. They specifically say it's been 7 years since he died, so why didn't he come back and seek vengeance until now? What, is there like a waiting list to become a zombie or something? Oh, I get it! He came back to life because the whiskey spilled into his grave. Now it all makes sense. Back in the mansion, Cass, Hank's wife, wonders where he is, and after agreeing to go look for him, Sylvia, Cass's aunt and head of this household, heads to the kitchen looking for Mrs. Danvers, her housekeeper. She spots some muddy footprints on the floor, and as she walks in, guess who turns up?
Mrs. Danvers.
Oh, wait, false alarm, she's fine. Look, she even blinks and everything. Actually, she is supposed to be dead, having just been killed by our favorite cake-craving zombie. Sylvia's next on his hit list as he kills her by holy shit! Okay, I know this thing has already killed 3 people, and I'm not particularly squeamish or anything, but that shit was straight out of Mortal Kombat!
Finish her. Fatality.
So now that Sylvia's lost her head, Cass and Richard are the only ones left. They decide to go look for the others, and of course they run directly into the zombie.
Father's Day. I got my cake. Happy Father's Day.
This ends one story and leads us into the next, entitled The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, or as I like to call it, Stephen King, the Overacting Stereotype. Okay, so maybe that's a little harsh. I mean, I've definitely seen worse, but just take a look at the very first scene of this segment.
Holy old Jesus!
And that's as good as it gets. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, I do still kind of enjoy this segment, if only for how cheesy, over the top, and downright silly it can get, but yeah, this acting is about as subtle as a meteor slamming into your face. Speaking of meteors, that's just what this story starts off with, a meteor crashing into a farmer's field. The farmer in question happens to be Jordy Verrill, this stereotypical dumb hick who, as mentioned, is played by Stephen King. After inspecting the meteor and burning his fingers on it, Jordy starts fantasizing about selling it to the local college in order to pay off his bank loans.
That's the ticket. Got to cool some bitch off. Yeah.
Unfortunately for Jordy, he manages to break the meteor in half after trying to cool it down with some water. He believes this will make it worthless because, well, he's stupid. In any case, he still decides to pick it up and try his luck at selling it the next day.
Meteor ship.
I have no comment, that speaks for itself. Anyway, after Jordy goes back inside and watches some TV, we see the meteor's crater has filled with some glowing green ooze that is causing a bunch of weeds or grass or something to grow all around it and leading up to the house. We also see Jordy sucking his fingers where he burnt them once in a while, and eventually he makes a disturbing discovery.
Jesus Christ.
What the hell?
Sorry, Mr. Verrill. His fingers have got to come off.
Now, what was I doing again? Oh, that's right, I was opening this box, that's it. What the fuck? Just what the hell kind of doctors have Jordy been seeing? I mean, I know this is just his imagination running wild and all, but it has to be based on something, right? And why the hell is the doctor and the college professor from before the same guy? Seriously, this is some fucked up shit. Either way, Jordy decides not to call the doctor after all. Unfortunately, the stuff just continues to grow and eventually covers most of his body. As it also itches quite a bit, Jordy decides to take a bath in order to try and get some relief when someone suddenly appears to him in the mirror.
Jordy!
Eddie?
Jordy!
But you're dead.
Whoa, wait a minute. So you're telling me that the person Jordy's been seeing in his daydreams has been his dead father all along? What the hell kind of sense does that make? And no, I'm not even kidding. That's the same guy as in the other visions. Okay, so maybe they're not actually supposed to be the same person, but if they're not, why not just get 2 more actors? You're seriously telling me that that would have been too much to ask? No, in my opinion, they are the same person, and Jordy's just got some major issues. Whatever the case may be, Jordy's father warns him not to get into the tub, as the stuff will only grow quicker if he does.
You get in that water, Jordy. You might as well sign your death warrant.
Jordy does think about it for a minute, but ultimately decides to jump into the water, which eventually leads to him becoming completely covered in the moss-like substance. Just wanting to end it all, Jordy gets a hold of a shotgun, and if you remember the title of this little story, you probably know where this is headed.
Please, God, let my luck be in. Just this once. Please, God, just this once.
And in today's weather.
On to our next story, something to tide you over, which starts with Ted Danson being awakened by a knock at the door. It turns out to be Leslie Nielsen who threatens to hurt a certain Becky unless Danson lets him in. He decides to play along for now, and we'll learn that Danson's character is named Harry and Nielsen's is named Richard. Apparently, Richard is there because Harry stole his wife away from him, which Richard really doesn't like. Not so much because he was so in love with her, but because, well, why don't I let him explain it?
Well, I don't know whether I ever loved you or not, Harry. That doesn't matter. The point is, I keep what is mine. No exception to that rule, ever. No exceptions, Harry. Ever.
Wow, that was surprisingly chilling. Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily think Leslie Nielsen could be that creepy, would you? I mean, the man was mostly known for doing pretty silly comedy flicks, but here he plays a total psycho, and pulls it off quite well. That's quite an impressive range in my opinion. Either way, it's already pretty obvious that Richard is fucking nuts, but in case you needed further proof, he also brought Harry a little audio tape.
Harry, he's got me. Please come. Please. He's got me. If you don't come, then please, Harry, please come.
I had to stop it there. I couldn't bear to record anymore.
What have you done with her? You talk to me, you son of a bitch, or I'm gonna kill you.
Well, you kill me and you'll never find out. Now, don't get naughty, Harry. If I fall down on this floor and hit my head on that hard marble, well, I could fracture my skull.
That would be fine with me.
Yeah, and then you'll never know. And believe me, Mr. Truelove, you want to know. Because by 11 this morning, it's going to be too late.
Shit! Talk about a tense moment! You could probably hear a fucking pin drop on a velvet cushion during that scene. I mean, yikes! I really can't stress enough how good the acting is here either. Both of these guys do a phenomenal job of portraying their characters' emotions and state of mind, and you completely forget that they were both considered mostly comedy actors, really. I mean, it's a bit of a step up from
Meteor ship!
So after convincing Harry to accompany him, Richard brings him to a private beach where he shows him what looks like a grave. Harry runs over to it only to discover that it's just a big hole. He pulls up the shovel next to it to strike Richard, but unfortunately, Richard has a gun.
Jump into that hole. force me to shoot you, Harry. Sorry.
Although Harry is very reluctant to do so, Richard has him kneel down and pull the sand in over him. Once he's covered all the way up to his head, Richard brings him a TV and shows him a rather disturbing video.
It's showtime!
Oh my God. You are insane.
I promised that you'd see Becky again. I kept my promise. Is that insane?
Crazy.
Upon seeing the tide coming in, Psycho McCrazypants here tells Harry that he might just make it out of this if he can hold his breath long enough, and then leaves him to drown. We then get treated to this weirdly familiar tune as Richard drives back to his house. Did I just hear that right? I'm not going crazy, am I? They really did just play Camptown Races, right? Deep? Seriously, that is Camptown Races, the famous minstrel song. You know, the one used in a lot of Looney Tunes shorts and the like? Why the hell are they using that here? Okay, so it is a rather weird and warped version of the song, but still, what the hell's the purpose of it? Is it supposed to symbolize how insane Richard is or something? I just don't get it. In any case, after Richard gleefully watches Becky and Harry drown via the monitors in his house, he heads back to the beach, but is unable to locate either of them. He seems a bit nervous, but he assures himself that they simply must have been dragged out by the currents. Back at his house, Richard finishes watching a movie as he has a faint voice calling his name. He tries to convince himself that he's just imagining things, but that soon becomes pretty hard to do as he starts hearing more and more noises. We also see two figures roaming through his house, eventually making their way to his bedroom door.
You can't shoot us dead, Richard, because we're already dead. If you can hold your breath, if you can hold your
I can hold my breath for a long time!
What the hell was up with that sitcom ending?
I can hold my breath for a long time!
Uh-oh, looks like Richard's in over his head this time. We'll be right back. With that, we get our penultimate story named The Crate. It begins with a janitor flipping a coin and losing it under some stairs. While trying to reclaim it, he spots the eponymous crate, but before anything can develop with that, we cut to some fancy garden party where some annoying bitch is running her mouth off.
Oh, Dexter, you are such a child. You and Henry both, you're such children. But at least Henry has me to take care of him, don't you, dear?
This is Wilma.
Oh, just call me Billy. Everyone does.
Okay, Billy it is. Apparently, she's attending some university faculty party along with her husband Henry, and they are talking to his friend Dexter.
Just Dexter will do it.
Fine. Like I mentioned, Billy is kind of an irritating and drunken bitch who makes absolutely everyone feel uncomfortable and embarrassed, especially her husband. Hell, he hates her guts so much that he actually fantasizes about killing her right then and there.
Oh, God, Henry, what's wrong now?
Not a thing, Wilma. Everything's just fine.
However, in real life, he is much too timid and, well, whipped to actually stand up for himself in any meaningful way, letting Billy walk all over him.
Oh, Henry, you are such a little kid. I swear to God you are. I mean, where would you be without me to take care of you?
We also learn that Dex has a bit of a thing for somewhat younger women, and that he and Henry plays chess together once in a while. While scheduling a game with Henry for the following night, Dex is suddenly called away for a phone call, which turns out to be the janitor calling about the crate he found. Dex initially shrugs the janitor's findings off as nothing of interest, but he gets more intrigued when the janitor reveals that the markings on the crate indicate that the contents are from some Arctic expedition that apparently took place in 1834. Dex rushes off to the university, and he and the janitor get the crate out from under the stairs and start getting it open, when something suddenly catches their attention.
You hear that? There's something in there, Doc. Something shiny. It looks like a couple of emeralds.
Holy fuck! It's a baboon mixed with a critter! A babita! That doesn't sound very threatening, does it? Well, whatever this thing is, it sure isn't friendly, as it completely devours the janitor, leaving nothing but blood behind. Dex, naturally being a teensy bit freaked out, runs into the university corridors where he comes across Charlie, a grad student. Dex tries to explain the situation, but as he's relatively hysterical, Charlie has a bit of a hard time believing him and decides to check things out for himself. Charlie does find a lot of blood, and after realizing that the creature has dragged the crate back under the stairs, he starts investigating. He manages to get a hold of one of the janitor's shoes, but unfortunately ends up getting eaten in the process. Dex then runs off to Henry's house, where after a couple of nerve-calming drinks, he tells him the whole story. Dex also mentions that he had an idea of how to get rid of the creature on his way over.
I kept thinking about the Riders' Quarry. You know that place? I know it. See, I kept thinking that would be deep enough if only there was a way to get that crate over there. You know, I kept thinking of it. Oh, I don't know anymore. Am I going crazy, Henry?
No, you're not crazy. Now why don't you just sit right there and relax while I get these nice men with the big cuddly white coat to come in and take you away from the big bad scary monster, huh? That sound good? Actually, Henry has a slightly different idea. For whatever reason, he decides to believe Dex's story, no questions asked, and sees this as his opportunity to finally get rid of Billy, who is out drinking since Henry and Dex were supposed to be playing chess. Henry drugs Dex, writes a letter to Billy, and then heads over to the university. Once there, he begins to clean up the mess the creature caused as we see Billy comes home and discovers the letter.
Wilma, I've had to leave in a hurry because of a call from Dexter Stanley. He seems to have gotten himself in a great deal of trouble. It seems he got a young woman to accompany him to Amberson Hall under false pretenses and then attacked her. He said that she had curled up in a dark place and won't come out. I'm sorry to have to ask you to come over to Amberson Hall and help me out. But as you so often say, what would I do without you?
What indeed, Henry? What indeed?
When Billy arrives at the university, Henry continues with his charade, eventually tricking her into going under the stairs. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the creature is hungry anymore.
You know what, Henry? You're a regular barnyard exhibit. Sheep's eyes, chicken guts, piggy friends, and shit for brains. No good at departmental politics. No good at making money. No good at making an impression on anybody. And no good at all in bed. When was the last time you got it up, Henry?
You mean since I banged your sister the other day? Probably not since I fucked your mom. You cunt. Actually, Henry doesn't say that or anything like it, but thankfully the creature turns up after all and finally finishes off Billy. In fact, he almost seems to eat her just so she will shut up. Just look at him. Doesn't it look a little like he's going,
I had it with this bitch! Don't worry, I got this. Fuck you!
After the creature's done with his bitch steak, Henry manages to chain the crate up again and bring it to the quarry Dex mentioned. He dumps the crate into it, heads home, and tells Dex everything he did. They agree to keep quiet about the whole thing as they both sit down for a game of chess.
What if it gets out, Henry? What if it gets out of that crate?
Oh, for God. If you saw the way I chained it up, you wouldn't worry. That thing is drowned in its box 70 feet down. So, relax. Relax.
that somewhat ominous note, we come to our final story. They're creeping up on you, and I think I'm going to do a rather brief summary of this one. Why? Well, because there really aren't that many details worth going into here. Don't get me wrong, there are things to talk about, but not in the same way or quantity as most of the other stories. In any case, I can pretty much sum up this story in just a few sentences. Some germophobic billionaire is sitting around his plastic bubble of a penthouse apartment as it gets more and more infested with cockroaches. They eventually swarm pretty much the entire place, and he meets his end when they eat him up from the inside out. There is a bit more to it than that, obviously, but basically that's the story. I will mention a few things though, because certain aspects of this story are actually kinda clever. You see, we do learn a fair amount about this billionaire mogul, chief among which is that he's a pretty rotten guy. He constantly chastises his employees for the smallest things, hassles his superintendent over relatively minor problems, and he apparently caused the CEO of a company he bought up to commit suicide. The thing is though, that as the story progresses, certain things give the impression that this old fart may not be entirely sane. For instance, several of the cockroaches he apparently kills constantly spring back to life, and they also seem to pop right the fuck out of nowhere. If you also take into account the way he acts when he talks about these bugs, he doesn't seem quite stable anymore.
I've got this bug problem. Once you get bugs, you never get rid of them. They breed in the crawl spaces, in the conduits, in the very core of the building itself.
There's also a scene where he actually squashes a cockroach with his hand, but when he lifts it back up, the cockroach is gone. Okay, so you could definitely argue that this is just a bit of a continuity error or something, but you could also take it to mean that he actually just imagined that those bugs were there in the first place. Also, the calls he gets from the wife of the CEO who killed himself could be construed as his own conscience trying to catch up with him, although that may be a bit more of a stretch. What's not so far-fetched is the fact that when the superintendent, if that's actually what he is, comes to talk to this man, it seems a bit more like an orderly talking to an inmate at an insane asylum.
Talk to me. Who's that?
Good evening there, Mr. Pratt. Got bugs again, huh, Mr. Pratt?
Don't you talk to me like that, you hear?
What way, Mr. Pratt?
Like I was crazy.
Oh, no, sir, Mr. Pratt, sir. I don't think you is crazy, not at all.
Also, just look at his apartment. Yeah, I know, it's supposed to be a very clean, sterile environment since it's germ-free and all, but isn't it also a teensy bit reminiscent of a padded cell? I could list off several more examples, but what I'm getting at is that the line between what's actually real and what's in this guy's head gets more and more blurred as the story progresses. It really is rather clever, and it kind of forces you to decide for yourself what you believe to be real. Unfortunately though, the mystery is kind of ruined by the ending of this story, at least in my opinion. It seems to indicate quite clearly that this was just about a bad guy getting his comeuppance in the form of something a bit supernatural. In addition, I feel like I have to believe that's what they were going for when you consider the tone and overall style of the rest of the film. In any case, after this story, we get another little sequence of the family from the beginning, bookending the framing device of the film. We see the father having some neck and throat problems, which are revealed to be caused by the son stabbing a voodoo doll in the throat. And that's Creepshow. So, is it any good? Well, I'd say yes and no. You see, whether or not you like this film will depend entirely on what you think of the various stories. Personally, I think some of them are great, while others are pretty lame. The Crate is my overall favorite as it has a pretty cool story that could easily be expanded upon. I could definitely see it being adapted into a feature film, or possibly even a series, and it doesn't hurt that it has probably the best acting of all the segments featured here. I also really like Something to Tide You Over, if for no other reason than the hauntingly chilling performance from Leslie Nielsen. It really is a massive shame that we didn't see this guy do a lot more villain roles than we did. The remaining stories are either just kinda meh or downright crap. I do at least enjoy the silliness of the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill, but it doesn't have much else going for it. Come to think of it, I think it would have worked slightly better if they just completely removed all the dialogue and made it a silent feature. Seriously, that could have been pretty cool. Father's Day is just weirdly dull, and They're Creeping Up on You feels a bit misplaced and wrongly executed, which I guess makes them the worst stories. Okay, so they're more than watchable, but no, they're not really all that good. All in all, I would still recommend this film, especially if you're a big horror fan. There definitely are quite a few memorable moments here, and while you may not like the entire thing, you should be able to enjoy at least one of these stories. After all, you watch this crap, right? No, wait!
I feel so strange. I'm not what I used to be. Maybe something I ate. Trying to infiltrate. But I'm beginning to like what I see. You make me feel like a monster. You make me feel like a hungry lover. It's time you saw.
Wow, that was one spectacular video you just saw, wasn't it? Well, guess what? Now you can help make future episodes even better. I know, doesn't seem possible, right? Well, it's true. Simply click on the link to my Patreon page, select the amount you want to donate, and click Become a Patron. By doing this, you will not only allow me to increase my liquor budget, make the show better, but you'll also be able to collect several wonderful rewards, such as access to exclusive videos, your name in the credits, your choice of topic for a video, magical powers, immortality, and much, much more. Well, what are you waiting for? Follow the link, make your donation, and become a patron today.